Welcome back to the Decarbonisation Summit in partnership with SSE Energy Solutions, and thank you very much indeed for everyone joining us both here in the room and online. We move on to our second panel of the day, and that panel is on investment in sustainable cities, sponsored by Deloop, who are a software management solutions provider in the electric vehicle space. So thank you very much indeed to Jane Hoffer, the CEO of Deloop. So joining us on today's panel are Jane Hoffer, Peter Durante, who's Head of Technology and Innovation at Macquarie Asset Management, Carla De Trio, who is the Director of Business Development at Volta Trucks, Sunday Alawiye, who's the Sector Director for Smart Energy Systems at SSE, and joining us from offstage, Tracy Rawlings, Executive Member for Environment and Transport at Manchester City Council. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. If I could just first ask you all to say a little bit about what you do and with relevance to the sphere of decarbonisation and investment in cities. Jane, as our panel sponsor, may I open up to you to just give us a sense of that, please?
Sure. Thanks, Aid. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to sponsor. So I'm Jane Hoffer. I'm the CEO of Deloop, formerly known as Go With Flow. We are a software technology provider, and our mobility change platform is used by organizations and municipalities to help them decarbonize mobility. Specifically, our parent company is Galp Energia from Portugal, and we help in Portugal manage over 4,800 charge points in the public sector, about 1,000 charge points in private implementations, and over 3,500 fleet vehicles that are decarbonizing. Thanks very much, Jane.
Tracy, can I hand over to you, please, to give us a sense of what you do for Manchester City Council, please?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Councillor Tracy Rawlings, and I'm responsible for our environment and transport work. And in the city, we have our own climate change action plan, which means we aim to be zero carbon by 2038 at the latest. As an organisation, the City Council itself is doing really well in that, in terms of decarbonising and reducing our own emissions. However, we have huge challenges with a city like ours because there are so many different sectors and needs across the city. You know, decarbonisation, reducing emissions, it's very much a need to do, not a nice to do thing for us, quite rightly. But actually, how do we deal with that when we're supporting all of our stakeholders to make those changes? You know, and where do we find that investment to encourage that accelerating change to make the difference that we need to be to reach those targets for 2038, which are absolutely key for us. You know, from housing retrofit to electric vehicles to making changes for our residents, for the nighttime economy, all those different sectors, it becomes a real challenge for us. So I think one of the things I'm really interested in is what other solutions people on the panel have seen that can enable us and other cities to accelerate that change and be the change that we absolutely need to be for the future.
Thanks so much, Tracy. There will be a real interchange of ideas, I think, between the public and private sectors across the Decarbonisation Summit, and we're delighted to have you here. And indeed, we are working very closely with Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and I'm delighted to say this afternoon we'll be joined by Andy Burnham on the Mayor's panel. Sunday Alawiye, please give a sense of what you do for SSE, please.
Yes, I'm Sunday Alawiye. I'm the Sector Director for Smart Energy Systems. Our focus is really about helping local authorities and private sector organisations decarbonise their buildings. So we work a lot in energy performance contracts where we deliver guaranteed savings. At the moment, our contracts are delivering about 3,000 tonnes annually for private sector and local authorities. And now we're trying to understand how do you get to a smart energy system that helps campuses, universities and big areas of infrastructure pull together. So we want a single pane of glass that brings electric vehicles, solar generation, heat networks and smart building data so we can optimise the infrastructure on site and optimise capital costs and OPEX.
Thanks very much, Sunday. Peter, over to you.
Peter Durant from Macquarie. So I head up what we call our Technology and Innovation Group globally for Macquarie Asset Management. We're the biggest infrastructure asset manager in the world, so we own about 160, 170 infrastructure companies. In the UK, that would include things like Aberdeen, Glasgow, Southampton, and Farnborough airports. We own Cadence Gas Network, we own Roadchef, much of the offshore wind in the UK, Southern Water, or one of the water companies, lots of commercial property, residential property, etc., parking assets, that sort of thing. We committed to get to net zero a couple of years ago by 2040. So before COP, you know, it was very much a bold statement at the time. And so my team, looking at emerging technology and looking at how we apply that technology, is largely focused on how do we do that. So now that we've set this rather ambitious goal, and sort of market-leading goal at the time, how do we actually implement that? So we spend a lot of time working on what are our new investments, how do we price both the risk and disruption from technology, and how do we work with our portfolio companies to actually implement that tech.
Very good, thank you very much. And Carla, lastly over to you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for having us. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carla Detrieux. I'm the head of business development with Volta. He asked me to drop the sales pitch, so I try to keep it as inspirational as I can. So we're a truck manufacturer, electric truck manufacturer from Sweden. We're still quite young, 2 years old, but we already are getting into full production this year. I personally have been with the company since day one. I'm the first employee, and I've seen it going from a fantastic idea to something concrete. So our solution is not only the asset, but also bringing in the whole ecosystem with truck as a service. So going from the charging infrastructure to the insurance to the telematics, technology, everything that an operator needs to operate electric trucks, and doing that transition in the easiest way, if I can say.
It's a very cool looking truck too.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I know a little bit about Volta Trucks, and I know that in terms of the panel narrative investment in sustainable cities, that's exactly what Volta Trucks is all about. And you've been very successful going from, you know, an on-paper startup, really a sketch of a truck, through to capturing the hearts and minds of the investment community. Can you give us a sense of that investment journey that Volta's been on over the last couple of years?
Absolutely. So I think, you know, being successful is you know, very much all of the tailwinds that we've been benefiting from. So everything going from regulations to incentives, to the commercial traction, thanks to the value proposition. Like I said, it's a very cool looking truck, but it's also the safest. So we've developed the whole product around, for example, the direct vision standard that London implemented. We've always gone from full electric because that truck is meant for urban distribution, so inner cities. And that really triggered engagement from the investors community. So we raised different fundraisings. Most of our investors community come from Scandinavia, but then as we've gone into the Series B, so around 40 million, then 240 million Series C, we've gone into the US investors community, but not only funds, I would say also some corporate investors. So looking at our customers and suppliers that also are committed to helping us develop the project into something concrete.
Yeah, I know you have a very powerful solution dedicated to cities. So you could just explain for the audience how the Volta Trucks model works in terms of how you're geared up entirely around city solutions?
Absolutely. So maybe a few quick words about the truck, the product itself. So we are starting from a blank piece of paper. So we've removed 90% of mechanical spare parts compared to any diesel vehicle. So obviously the design is optimized to be electric from the beginning. The cab it's designed with complete freedom because we don't suffer from any legacy. We start from scratch. So the whole environment is thought around the comfort of the drivers, so very much working on the ergonomy of drivers. So we know now in the UK this is definitely a major pain point for operators, to transport companies. We are suffering from around 100,000 truck drivers missing. So it's about also bringing in younger generations, more women to the industry, and making it cooler and sexier, in fact. Mm-hmm. So the trucks are designed for urban distribution, so around 200 kilometers range for the 16-ton, and then we'll develop an 18, 7.5, and 12-ton, so full product within the range by 2025 perspective. Then, the model is very much return to base, urban distribution again, so in ambient refrigerated. So we tackle many market verticals, from the major retailers of this world to parcel and pallet distribution. And I briefly talked about truck as a service. So it's in fact providing the asset. The tick is whether the operator wants to buy it as a CapEx or finance it as an OpEx solution. And then, as we talked about the charging infrastructure, we have this project management skill where we want to understand, first of all, the use case of each customer, because it's not about saying, guys, we are delivering a truck and any charging infrastructure. It needs to be bespoke for each operator. We need to take into account the grid connection, the power available on site, and then each use case. So we look through the telematics, so it really is a deep study that we convey internally. And then, again, we provide the full ecosystem with a few services à la carte, I would say. And then it ends up being a subscription-based model, which we've seen in multiple industries. We know that there's a transition. Why not do it with this type of assets that really cost a lot more money if you want to buy it upfront? It's not like any diesel truck. Like it can be 3 times more. So why not finance it? Why take the risk when Volta and our finance partnerships can do that for operators.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense. Answers your question, Aid?
Very good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Carla. So staying with the theme of investment in transport in cities, you're obviously funded to a certain degree with a major oil company who are making an energy transition into e-mobility and sustainability in cities. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and the Deloop story around that, please?
Sure.
Jane?
So as I mentioned, Galp Energia is our parent and our majority investor. They purchased technology and a team out of R&D in Portugal that has over a decade of experience in fleet electrification, micromobility, and in fact, the software that was developed is the backbone of the public charging network in Portugal. So when Galp decided they needed to really get on the energy transformation, they realized, number one, they're a CPO, so they're going to be building out a charge point network in Portugal and Spain and Iberia as their target market. They have lots of B2B customers who need to transition to electric vehicles of all sorts, light duty, medium duty, and heavy. And then also they have a large fleet themselves. So they saw that the opportunity to create this company through the acquisition of the assets and the team was something that would really accelerate them. And then also, we're an independent company, and our mandate actually is to support our major investor, but also to take the technologies globally because they're needed. So since the start of the company in 2019, we've expanded to Spain, to the UK. We have presence here now, as well as the US. And so the funding from Galp right now is based upon those strategic plans that kind of balance between the value creation in a startup that will expand to other markets, as well as the value delivered to them through their own use and operation.
And do you have a strategic focus on cities? Is that part of your strategy?
So we have a large experience in cities. So Lisbon and Porto, we've been very involved in the electrification of the fleets, the implementation of the charging infrastructure. We have a very interesting project going on in Memphis right now in the US as part of the Biden administration's EDA, the Economic Development Association, Build Back Better Regional Challenge. We were part of a consortium with the University of Memphis, City of Memphis, Ford, FedEx, public-private partnership that submitted to the grant. We were one of 60 out of 520 regions chosen. And we're now in the phase 2 evaluation process, but it's all about city and the region. And I think it's an interesting topic for us to get into because it's not just urban downtown. It's how do you have commuters and visitors and such engage in mobility in a region.
Thanks very much. There's an interesting topic of conversation around the rapid shift to e-mobility in the United States at the moment, but that's the subject of another panel, so we'll hold that thought. But Peter, give us a sense of what's going on at Macquarie Asset Management around investment in sustainable cities, maybe some examples of exciting companies you're working on, but interested to hear what your work is in this area.
Yeah, so lots of different things. To your point, I think it's really worth thinking about too. Cities are not just the downtown. And if you really want to look where a lot of emissions in many cities come from, it's that sprawling network of both commuters and industry and infrastructure and goods that move around. Examples would be things like ports. So we own container ports and shipping ports, there are bulk ports and dry ports around the world, and say on the US West Coast, drayage trucks and yard trucks and all that sort of thing are one of the big sources of emissions, let alone ships coming in and out, right? So we're working on zero emission, zero carbon shipping fuels. We're working on electrifying the vehicles that are on site in ports, looking at ways to get zero emission trucks that are drayage ports and or rail, so that we can start having more inter or multimodal connections to get containers out of ports and therefore emissions in cities lower. A lot of work on EV charging in different parts of the world. As you might imagine, first and foremost on our own assets. Do a lot of work as well on electric mobility as a service. So be that charging and or vehicle fleet provision, that sort of thing as well, let alone renewables and energy storage. So there's data centers, telecoms. We invest in pretty much everything you'll find in a city, including building. In the UK, we're building thousands of new housing units that are built to rent accommodation. So we're looking at how can you make those as low carbon and as efficient as possible? How do you integrate those with public transport? How do you make sure that they're EV charging ready? That sort of thing.
with all of the incredible opportunities in this historic shift to a decarbonised way of working and living, how do you find the time, the space to focus on the really exciting wins? How does that?
I don't sleep. You know, I don't sleep that much. No, really, you just have to be sort of voracious and passionate about it, and constantly chatting with people, constantly reading, and then spending lots of time. I mean, we're really lucky too that within our portfolio companies themselves, there's an awful lot of expertise. So I was just 2 weeks ago in the US with a bunch of our C-suite executives and an annual get-together, and being able to hear some of the amazing things that are happening in our hyperscale data centers and some of the really cutting-edge technology they're working on, working with our ports who are already electrifying and automating everything. So a lot of what we do is about sharing best practice. So it's figuring out, you know, who are the companies around the world that are doing a great job at this, who are the ones that are struggling, who are the ones who haven't even thought about it, how do we bring them together and start sharing some of that. And we spend a lot of time with third parties, externals, local regulators, national regulators, that sort of thing as well.
Very good. We'll come on to homes in a second, Sunday, but just to keep with the theme of transportation and return to you, Tracy, are there any exciting ideas you've heard from the private sector here that are perhaps relevant and interesting to you in terms of Manchester City and your ideas?
Thanks. I mean, we're always keen to learn and bring new ideas to such an innovative city like Manchester, so I'd be keen to continue these conversations. I think for us, we've done quite a lot of this stuff already, so we've moved most of our bin collection fleet to electric vehicles with support from our contractor. We are using electric fleet within our own vehicles within the City Council and e-cargo bikes actually as much as we can in terms of our parks, works, etc. So it's really kind of interesting to think a bit wider and learn from your broader experiences around what else can we do to encourage our other stakeholders. As I've said, we're a huge city with a mixed economy of all sorts of shapes and sizes, and we mustn't forget our residents in this as well. How do we make this accessible to them in a way that they can be part of and afford to make these changes? So I think really keen to learn some of that new innovative stuff. So we kind of feel we've done the basics, we're improving our walking and cycling infrastructure, we're continuing to encourage as many businesses that can to move to electric vehicle charging, etc., etc. We're putting in more charging points across the city. We've got lots of great Manchester-wide initiatives. What else can we do that's different, that's working, that we can put in and encourage and excite people? Because I'm really excited and passionate about the absolute necessity to make these changes, and it's bringing people on that journey, isn't it? So I think that's the next step that we're at. How do we bring people in and say, you're part of this, you need to be part of this, what else can we do to make it attractive? And I think that is about that, encouraging the investment, isn't it, and new ways of working. So really keen to learn more of that today.
May I put your question around how do we excite people to the rest of the panel? I think that's a nice engagement narrative. So I'll go through the panel Sunday. How do we excite people about the transition to decarbonisation in our cities?
I think it's really about case studies and demonstrating what you've done. I think there's a lot of good work that's been going out there. So we're working with a couple of local authorities and councils where we've decarbonised their buildings, and we realised they've got, you know, space on their point of connection to put EV charging in their car parks. Their car parks are now open to the public, so we've just delivered 10, 20 EV charge points for them. So I think using case studies of interesting projects to show people where the technology's at, because even when you look at solar panels, there's a lot of people. I was having a conversation with my neighbour the other day, and he was like, oh, you're going to put solar panels in your house? I was like, yeah, if I could, but I've got trees that are shading my roof. So if I literally could, I'd cut them down, but they're TPO. And I think there's a lot of people who still don't understand how far the technology's come. And solar panels in this industry and people working in this room know that that's a great cost saver, but looking at heat pumps with the public sector decarbonisation scheme, that's helping to drive understanding that these technologies are here now. We talk about hydrogen, there's a lot of projects that have done a lot of good there. We've got EV bus hubs in London. So I think we need to do a bit more work trying to show the public, actually, these technologies are here, they're cost effective, and they're doing the job. And the more we commit to them, the better the technologies go.
Jane, perhaps you've got a bit more of a challenge with software being an exciting vector for change, but some of the outcomes of your work, I'm sure, are super exciting. How would we excite people about the opportunities in this space?
I think in general, though, aside from the software technology, I think just visibility is key. So what excites me, and I think others, is driving along and seeing all of the automotive ads that are up there that are all electric or plug-in hybrid now. It's visible, right? And so that's something that just generates excitement and curiosity. I think it's things like what GreenTV is doing in the Blenheim Live, and just exposing the public to driving an EV, because once you get into an EV and you drive an EV, you really love it, right? And there's studies that have shown that. So I think it's that. I think it's other programs, perhaps like something that Galp is doing. When they do a solar implementation, they actually do a community-based outreach, and they do a program specifically for the community. One example is a shared bike service that's going in. So give back to the community. That's built into the project development cost is the bike sharing service, and in fact, we're running that for them. So we're actually packaging services in with the development initiatives to help in that community exposure and give back.
Excitement.
One that has nothing to do with us, but just as a citizen, so maybe I can comment on that. So I live in London. You mentioned things like EV charging and solar. So many of you will be familiar with the Solar Together scheme that's being run around the country. I unfortunately missed it. We're moving borough and missed being able to sign up for it by 2 weeks, which is a shame, but it was an amazing program, right? And the success that I've seen, for those who don't know, Solar Together is a scheme that's being run around the country. It's effectively community buying, where the local council will shortlist down to one installer for solar and batteries and EV charging. You as a resident can sign up and say, I'm interested. You're not making any commitment, and then you'll come and get a binding quote from the installer, and if you like the quote, then you can proceed. And the prices are extremely good. The level of competence is good. My local council, I live in Hammersmith and Fulham, the outreach they've been doing is amazing. So kind of going around and knocking on doors, local community engagement. I've sat in on some of the sessions. I'm an energy expert, but I sat in on some of the sessions to see how they were explaining these topics of, well, you're facing north and you've got a tree in the way. So is this really, but they've done a great job, actually, and they brought in some good people. Yeah. And let's be honest, what's going on in the world energy markets at the moment is probably the single greatest driver that we've seen. I have many of my family and friends and colleagues and neighbors and things who are not particularly environmentally conscious, is a nice way to put that, who would have seen me as the tree-hugging hippie before, now saying, well, how do I put solar on my roof? What's a heat pump? And where do I get an EV, and can I borrow yours? So I think, it's now that these products are there, they're visible. 20+% of new car sales in the UK are plug-in hybrid or battery electric, mainly battery electric. They are visible. People now see these. They realize that it's not just a fanciful thing. It's not a few weird Tesla drivers anymore. Yeah. It's lots of other people. I share your experience. I was once at a wedding and I explained what I did, and someone said, are you a church-going fellow? Now everyone wants to talk about electric cars. I imagine in the world of excitement, having a 16-ton battery electric truck is a pretty easy sell. You feel like the Volta experience is an exciting one that people are really engaging with?
Yeah, well, I sold it to my mom. She never. She's a
truck driver now. That's pretty cool.
I mean, if I take this example of people that are close to me, my mother never knew anything about logistics. I think she was sensible to sustainability and decarbonization, but she didn't really understand. So I think the key point for people is to understand and educate them about the benefits, for them to visualize the added value and the risks that we are taking by not taking actions now. Yeah. I think to very much showcase the value, I agree, pilots are probably the starting point. And to your point, I think there's not one solution to the problematic or the opportunity. It's various solutions for various different use cases. And 16-ton electric trucks aren't going to respond to all of the challenges, right? It's the whole value chain. It's all of the OEMs, all of the providers out there that need to commit to make an impact now.
Thanks very much. Sunday, let's change tack and look at government incentives to help investment in sustainable cities. What's your sense of that from an SSE perspective?
Yeah, I think it's driving forward, but I think we probably need to do some more work. So the PSDS scheme has been quite a big success, where effectively the government's giving grants to public sector bodies to decarbonise their heat. So you have to ensure that you can remove gas boilers and take out heavy consumers of carbon and put them into electric heat pumps, electric heating. So we've done a number of projects with local authorities and councils and helped them deliver, £5 million of investment and put batteries in schools where they would never be able to afford that. So we've decarbonised schools for 24 hours on the weekend because of that investment. Excellent. So I think that's a good starting point to try and drive the public sector to help them pull investment in. And understanding energy efficiency is probably the key of that, because you know, if you look to 2017, the total demand for energy is about 945 terawatt hours electric equivalent. And when we get to 2050, we'll be around 645 terawatt equivalent. So there's still that 30% gap. So we need to try to work out how to incentivize kind of that energy efficiency investment as well. And a lot of the stuff they do in Canada, the DNOs are involved in that. So they actually give private businesses, you know, a 2p incentive to save energy up to 20% of their total demand.
Yep.
And it helps them save costs and reinforcing the grid. So rather than Ofgem giving DNOs to reinforce, they're using it to drive two problems at the same time. You're stopping the reinforcement upgrade costs and you're decarbonising the private sector. So I think we're going on a good journey, and there's a lot of work we're doing now using digital twins to help drive that process. And so far it's working, but I think we need more investment. So GLA have also done quite an interesting piece where if you don't offset a new development, you have to pay a carbon offset price, which is about £60 a tonne. And then that carbon offset price goes into an investment fund that the GLA can then use to decarbonise local authorities, non-profit, help small SMEs we talked about earlier that don't necessarily have those funds to deliver that decarbonisation, but it's funded by the bigger investment pieces. So I think there's still work to be done on incentives to really drive it and really work on how do we take that money from the big private sector investment and help to drive across to the public sector and smaller SMEs.
I know Andy Burnham wants to talk about incentives to progress this sector, and I'm sure we'll hear more from him this afternoon. Peter, at that kind of policy and fiscal level, do you see those levers being pulled in the right direction to really push investment in sustainable cities?
Right direction, of course, everybody's always going to say it could be more, it could be better, it could be different. Things like the Rapid Charging Fund, for example, are really, really interesting. I mean, you know, a passionate EV advocate for many years, but we all know that you need charging infrastructure to get people comfortable, and the fact that they know it's there and it's available and it'll work and all that sort of thing. There are a lot of really good CPOs out there now, so it's no longer just Tesla. A lot of good CPOs building networks, which are great, both on the high power and the low power side. But it's still really difficult, especially on the high power side, to get grid connections. So that's your main lead item at the moment, is being able to get the grid and understanding how that works and how you build that in, and then not oversizing and kind of pre-building too much is a concern that governments understandably have and investors can have. But then again, if governments really want this to happen and they want the ban on ICEs to happen in 2030, some of that is engaging a bit more. And that's not just on motorways. So we own Roadchef, so I'm talking my book a bit. But it's in cities, right? So lots of people do need rapid charging, whether it's for buses, whether it's for commercial fleets, heavier trucks, that sort of thing. High power charging has a role to play in a lot of those. So that's one area where more could be done. And then certainly on things like just how we crack the back, and I don't have the answer to it, on things like efficiency in homes. So there have been lots and lots of support schemes available to people for a long time to insulate and do all sorts of other things. There's a bunch of principal agent reasons why that's not straightforward, and I think just offering money to people isn't necessarily the answer, but it's one of those things that I know various people in government are wrestling with, of how do you actually get people, if you're a tenant in a property versus a landlord, how do you do that? Or if you only think you're going to own that property for 5 years, how do you make a deep energy retrofit where you have to move out of your house for 3 years, or for a year whilst you're doing it? And there's the skills gap as well. So anybody, I'm renovating a home at the moment, there's a skills gap. I can definitely attest to that when it comes to the energy efficiency side. So
I know Macquarie Asset Management took ownership of the former Green Investment Bank, which was the UK government's bank for investing in this sector. Do you feel like you have the ear of government advising them on new levers that they should be pulling around?
Yeah, we think the government's been really receptive. I mean, not just because we own what is now the Green Investment Group. It's not a bank anymore. But we think in generally the government's been really receptive to this and really engaging industry a lot. So that's national government down to council levels. I think have actually done a pretty good job. You know, we may not always agree with everything that comes out, you know, but that's to be expected. But generally speaking, I think there's been a big push to get industry on board with things, industry and the investment community on board with things. So they are listening. They are listening. It's on a journey, but it's a lot better than it was a couple of years ago, and I think we're in the right direction.
Tracy, what's your sense of things at the local government level? Do you think there's good national support for incentivising change in sustainable cities?
It needs to be so much more and so much quicker, I think.
I thought you might say that.
She can say that.
It'd be foolish of me not to, wouldn't it? That said, we have been very fortunate in Manchester around the PSDS scheme that you mentioned, Tunde, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme. We have been able to decarbonise many of our own assets, our own buildings through that, and we've just been successful with round 3. So we have benefited benefited from that, but also as a city council we've topped that up so that we could do a bit more. So it's about making the most of that, isn't it? And we committed to that with our own cash as well. So I think we do need more, we want more, but we can also demonstrate that when you give us stuff, we'll spend it well, and we will do what we said we'll do. And I think that's really important, that we can demonstrate the benefits of this. And I think that storytelling again, why are we doing this in our public buildings? Because our residents come into our libraries, we can demonstrate the difference it's making, and then talk to people about how we can make changes, how they can be part of that and make changes in their own homes. So I think it is a journey, and you use these projects as flagships, don't you, to demonstrate that the technologies are there, they are being tried and tested. We're testing them, having the hiccups in our own buildings before we expect residents and tenants to make those commitments, as you say, which is a big deal. It's a big deal, particularly in the environment that we're living in today.
Yeah.
Can I just say that's a really important message I've never heard a local government make, which is we're trying them and testing them in our buildings first to deal with the hiccups, and then so you don't have to deal with that. Because I hear the criticism a lot from residents of saying, why is the local council spending all this money upgrading their own building? Shouldn't they be giving that to residents? I think it's a really interesting argument I've never heard made. So we should all make that argument more.
That's true. I mean, even with the heat pump revolution, we're doing a lot of projects at the moment, and there's a lot of manufacturers claiming that they can deliver certain conditions to a building, and going from a boiler to a heat pump is a very different technological delivery strategy. So actually work with the local authority to understand all these manufacturers, what they can do, how does the actual technology work, and actually guaranteeing those savings. So in the future phases, we can say, well, don't work with that. Think about actually the greenhouse warming gas potential of the refrigerants, because there's a lot of things that people aren't thinking about, and going to CO2, and actually getting that base level to say we've had 2-3 years of operation. This is the kind of best practice to do for public sector and for the domestic sector.
Yeah, we had a similar narrative play out in the SME panel this morning, talking about that creative interchange between smaller companies and larger companies, testing, trying, fail, repeat, improve. Yeah.
Get into the sandbox and quicker delivery. So that's what the incentives, and I think, like you said, the public sector decarbonisation scheme has really helped drive that. So that next generation of heat pump installations are going to be a lot better, and the private sector and the domestic sector has a lot to learn from that. Yeah,
very good. Peter, do you work in cities on an international level, and if so, do you have some learnings from other countries that perhaps you could share with us?
Yeah, we're quite global. So what you see in sort of, I'd say best practice, but just different practices around the world do vary a lot. So I would say across Europe, most of our cities are on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff in the decarbonization space. But that said, just go spend time in China. And it's not always a popular topic. I mean, the example many of you probably already know, but Shenzhen, where BYD is based, went from no electric buses to only electric buses, 16,500 of them in about a 5-year period. The North American equivalent is sort of what New York plus New Jersey, Chicago, Toronto, LA, and Houston combined, and they did that in 5 years. There are hundreds of millions of electric motorbikes. They just, in many cities, just banned petrol bikes of all kinds and delivery vehicles. So there are certainly ways you could do it. Now, yes, of course, that's China. They can do things that we can't do as easily for a whole host of good reasons. But I think it's seeing the art of the possible is really interesting. And I know it really hit me when I was in a neighborhood somewhere in Shanghai where you're walking down the street and we're without a microphone having a conversation at this volume, and there are trucks and there are buses and there are motorbikes and dozens and hundreds of them, and we hear each other. It's genuinely more pleasant. A few years ago was the first time I heard the DFT here talk about noise pollution. And COVID, I think, reminded a lot of us of how nice it is when a city's quiet. So there's a lot of these selling points that I think we can certainly look at. I think other things around Europe that some cities are doing around pedestrianization, more cycle infrastructure, that sort of thing are really interesting. It's not classic infra that we invest in per se, but it's infrastructure for cities that I think has a real impact. And then also looking at low emission zones are other things that, the UK cities have been quite good at this, but I think there's still a lot more that we could certainly do in that space, whether it's for fleets or buses or taxis.
Yeah, we often focus on the big ticket exciting items like electric trucks and electric cars, but really cycling and walking is a major vector for decarbonisation in Copenhagen, with great infrastructure and e-bikes. I think up to journeys on average are now going up to 20 kilometres because people are happy to travel by e-bike with those safe routes. But back to the subject of exciting electric trucks in cities outside of the UK. So I know you have a focus on Paris, Carla, so could you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Paris? It's a great vector for change in the sector, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Paris is probably the most aggressive diesel ban out there. So by January 2024, all diesel vehicles will be banned from Paris. So if we think about France in general, 45 low emission zones will flourish, and that's a third of all of the fleet in France. So 10 million vehicles, between passenger vehicles to trucks, to buses. I mean, so an enormous opportunity, definitely for manufacturers and for citizens, you know, to improve their life quality and air quality. So major opportunity, 2024, no more diesel, and then you have a second, another ban, which is 2030, and then that's banning any critère 1, so any petrol, gas. I mean, it will only be electric. Hydrogen might be there and ready by then. So, you know, an enormous flagship. And I think, you know, post Olympic Games, hopefully that will give even more tailwind or influence within Europe, so that we can see more of this. Because if I pause here and tell you a little bit about the commercial traction that we're getting with Volta, we are in the pre-order stage, so we're getting commitment from our different customers and prospects, and 90% of the multiple thousand of units that are pre-ordered, 90% are for Paris. So again, this showcases how important this is, and it's not only restrictive and adding penalties to that, it's also very much incentivizing companies and helping them through the transition. So there are incentives not only on the asset, but also on the capability studies that these operators need to do to find out, you know, what do I need to install, and then the charging infrastructure. So this won't last forever. We don't want it to last forever because that's not going to be viable. But it's, you know, this very valuable timeline where the technology isn't going to be perfect. You know, we need to manage expectations, and there's going to be challenges that I think you guys are probably experiencing, and that's action learning, and that's how you learn and you improve. So I want to encourage any thought leader in the room to very much take that first step and start, because this is how you will learn, and this is how you will go much more ahead, if I can say that, than any other. So I hope that...
And there's been a big shift towards active travel in Paris as well, is that right?
Say that again?
There's been a big shift towards active travel in Paris, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, Paris, you talked about noise. There's one regulation, there's this one, they are thinking about a similar direct vision standard. I mean, the whole city is you know, very much focused on mobility and air quality. You know, the mayor of Paris, this is a little bit her battle, if I can say, so she's very much driving that.
Very good. I'd like to hand over now to some questions from the audience. So someone will come around with a microphone. There are a couple of questions in the middle here. I'll ask both of you to stop if you could choose someone first. If you could say who you are, where you're from, and if you have a question for someone specifically, name that person, please.
So I'll stand up. Hi, my name is Azar Kayoum, so I'm a director and founder of Q Sustain Limited, Manchester-based company, SME. So we work predominantly within the rail sector, so we're decarbonising a lot of train stations and depots. And keeping on topic of sustainable cities, we do a lot of smart buildings as well, is thoughts around, are we really using our train stations and infrastructure hubs correctly? Transportation, as we know, is a big part of our carbon emissions, you know, up to 30% in 2019 alone. 91% of that was road transport, you know, 111 megatons of CO2, that was in 19 alone. So when we talk about decarbonisation and sustainable cities, we're working really hard with our clients like Network Rail to really look differently at our infrastructure hubs, predominantly like train stations. You look at our own Manchester Piccadilly, Victoria, you know, there's still lots of legacy issues, very dated, first in the railways. And should we really be using them with big EV charging hubs or end-to-end carbon emissions of individuals should be coming to a train station, EV charging at the station. That charging, we should be using our roof array at the stations with solar to help charging points in terms of a low-carbon transportation hub. And then you're getting on the train, which itself is obviously for medium-sized journeys, you can reduce up to 80% emissions compared to vehicle journeys. So it feels like we talk about sustainable hubs. I know we've had issues, and so the council will agree, on rail services alone, but if we can really focus on using our infrastructures effectively, and I'd love to hear Macquarie's thoughts around that. We can use it for heat networks. You know, we look at big station hubs in urban environments. There's quite a lot of space there in densely populated areas. We can use them as fuel cell hubs, hydrogen hubs, EV charging hubs, and really use our infrastructure quite differently to get people out of cars and into more sustainable transport modes. And I think Manchester has a great opportunity to do that. Because consider we've got HS2 coming up here, we'll get HS3 east-west connections to Leeds in the east and west. So really, should we be thinking differently how we use and design our infrastructure hubs? Thank you.
This sounds like a software as a solution question. Jane, would you like to give us some words on that?
I mean, sure. So I think the opportunity to leverage a mobility center is very important, right? So you see it with what you just described. In Portugal, in the train station, Orient train station, there's new mobility centers that are taking advantage of people coming in on the train, using e-bikes or scooters to move to their next location. Charging hubs and so on are going in. So I think it becomes that central point. And you need to look for what those points are. They might be a rail station. They might be other natural locations. Mobility as a service, it's actually something that our team in our history has done. So in Cascais, a suburb of Lisbon, we had the app that integrated parking, charging, public transit, et cetera, and had done that as a pilot. It did not continue after the pilot. For many reasons. It's hard to do that work in one app in any particular location because of all of the different systems and all of the different types of things. So I think that's a solution that has not taken off in a grand way, because for a software as a service, it's not scalable. But I think that there are elements of, if you will, a mobility catalog that can actually create now with APIs and other things to use to pull systems together. I think it's possible. It's not in our mandate right now. Our mandate is around the infrastructure support, but we're very interested in actually, in Memphis as well, we're part of the consortium to look at specifically how do you integrate all of those different things together, because in Memphis, they're all silos. I mean, there's a downtown commission for parking, it's complete silos. And so they don't naturally talk. And so the idea really is to bring them together first with the concept of a corporate mobility pact, like what we did in Lisbon with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to really get public sector, private sector talking about how do you create this nucleus and this type of hub approach, and then systems. It's more about the behaviors first. Thanks very much, Jane. There's a second question here from. Yeah, thank you very much. Could you say your name?
Yeah, sure. I better stand up now that Azar had. We've got a mini Mexican wave kicking off. My name's Steve Connor from Creative Concern. I'm also the Green Lead on the Greater Manchester Local Enterprise Partnership. And I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I'm really interested in the commonality of investment solutions for cities. And the Connected Places Catapult with the Core Cities Group in the UK is looking at a commission on climate investment for cities, because I think there's a huge opportunity not to tackle this city by city completely independently, and I'd love to know what you think about that. But then there was also a report by the Coalition on Urban Transitions that looked at how few countries have a cities policy. And so there's no policy framework, and the things that you've all mentioned are completely siloed, Jen, you're absolutely right. And I wonder whether we need a different kind of joined up policy framework for cities in the UK to actually pull this off. And my final point, which I'd love to know your thoughts on, is the investments going on that are creating unsustainable cities, because we're still building car parks, we're still building roads, and there's still cranes on the skyline buildings that we're going to have to retrofit to get to net zero, literally within a few years. So in some areas, we are still going in the wrong direction.
Who would like to answer that one first? Peter?
Oh, you were ready to go.
Well, I mean, I think one of the first bits about city policies is trying to put a price on carbon. So like I said, we talked about the GLA earlier, and they did a study to look at, the pound per tonne of carbon offset was £60, and that's gone up recently to £93. And on average, when we look at buildings, it's probably about £130 per tonne of carbon over its lifetime to decarbonise it by about 30%. So at least having a kind of policy framework that everybody can work towards to understand what is the cost of carbon and what is that number across the country, and have a set baseline will help to drive investment and understand the amount of money that needs to be put into the cities and kind of channel our thought process.
Tracy, would you like to say a few words on that question?
Nope. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Tunde. One of the things that when I first came into this post, I was like, what does it look like? What does a ton of carbon look like? It's a thing, and I can't actually visualize it. So we've done quite a lot of work on that, sort of developing graphics to explain to people, you know, this is what it looks like. It's however many football pitches, however many double-decker buses, whatever thing you need to relate to, we'll try and translate it into that. And I think you're right, having that unit cost is really good to enable us to put a figure on it. It's that thing about it, we need it to be reliable, don't we? So that end-to-end journey, you know, I'm not going to have a whole protracted conversation about trains today, but when your train is cancelled regularly, that doesn't help you make that transition from getting out of your car, walking to the Metrolink, getting the Metrolink to Deansgate, Piccadilly, wherever it is, and then going that extra mile. You know, we need to make sure that those things are reliable. It's like those hiccups I was talking about before, isn't it? Until we can get all the bits of the jigsaw reliable so that people trust it. So if I can't get to my meeting on time, if I'm going to be late, what am I going to do? It's easier and quicker to get into the car. We need to make those other options easier and quicker and cheaper so that they're affordable. So I think all of that needs to come together. And I think, you know, totally agree with you, Steve. We need to think differently about this, how we work together, and we don't do things city by city. You know, we need to work together, use our collective buying power, our collective experience, our collective influence to make bigger and better changes. And we need to be bold, and I need to be brave as a politician, as a decision maker, and just say, this is how it's got to be for our future. Change is always difficult, and it's going to come, and it's going to hurt, but we have to face that pain, I think, because we've got no choice. This is a necessity.
You tell them, Tracy. Talking of things to see, there are some very exciting things to see in the exhibition spaces outside, which are clear visualizations of the some of the e-mobility transport solutions we've discussed here. So Rally have their e-cargo bikes in the exhibition space outside here. EAV, really exciting four-wheel EV, is also on display here as well. And outside the building is an Alexander Dennis electric bus, which I'm personally very excited to take a look at. So do take a look at those real-world, palpable examples of decarbonising our cities. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for this panel discussion today. Super exciting. And we will break off now for another 45 minutes of networking. So do take advantage of that and go and see those exciting exhibition spaces. We touched on homes and buildings in this panel, and we will return in 45 minutes for a panel devoted to that subject area. So thanks very much indeed to the panel and to everyone here and at home for watching on, and see you soon. Thank you very much.